Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the our Lean Focus webinar today, and a series of webinars that we do. Today is improving inventory turns with the Dynamic Kanban, and it'll be presented by Josette Russell, our panelist. And we can go to the next slide.
Oh, no, it's not cooperating.
There we go. Today's presentation is confidential, and it's limited to the link that you should have, a personal link that's just for you, that allows you to go and watch the recording that will be published after in a few days after the presentation. And we can go to the next slide. And a couple of logistics. So all of the participants in today's webinar will be in the listen-only mode. PDFs are available, and you can download free PDFs from today's webinar from the control section of the webinar. In terms of Q&A, we love Q&A, and we ask you to type your questions into the chat. And we generally take questions at the end of the presentation. There's a little variation there, but if you would please type in the slide that your question is relevant to, just in case we have to recall it. And we'll take what questions we can at the end. And as I said a moment ago, a recording of the webinar will be available. It'll be emailed to you within a day or so. All right, and next slide. And with that, I'd like to hand the conversation over to Josette. Josette, thank you so much for presenting. Really looking forward to your talk today.
Sure, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you on board. My name is Josette Russell. I'm located in South Carolina. I've known Damon for years, and he and I are firm believers that businesses can improve their overall results by applying the lean tools. So my specialty is inventory management. I do lean practitioner, lean deployment, lean transformation work as a general thing, but my specialty really is inventory. So with that, we're going to just jump right into it. We're going to start with an introduction to what lean focus is, and we're going to talk about some of the roles and the goals and the pitfalls that exist within inventory. Then we'll go into how Kanban systems work, how you can improve inventory turns by looking at a case study for Kanban deployment, and some next steps that are your keys to success, some resources you might need, and then, as George said, we'll take some questions and answers at the end. So let's look at what lean focus is. We believe that every organization can be a high-performance culture, a high-performance operation, whether you're in manufacturing or in distribution, whether you're in healthcare, it doesn't really matter. Then that's a combination of having the right leaders, and those leaders have to be driven to succeed. They have to have experience with the lean tools, hands-on, not academic, reading a bunch of books, but actually having done this. They live it and they breathe it. And so we're looking for people that we can skill up or develop and educate and expose to lean tools. And if your organization doesn't have that, we can help you find those. That's one of the services we provide, and we're very proud of the network that we've got, that we can connect you to the people that you need. The next thing is the guiding principle. So when you look at lean, it's really a cultural way to run a business. It's 95% cultural and 5% technical. And a lot of people get that backwards. But when you're thinking about lean, you want to ask yourself, what is the core of what we live for? What's our true north? There are principles within lean that help you drive your business towards achieving those successes. And we want to eliminate waste in everything that you do. Every process has been subjected to lean tools and lean practices to make us as good as we can be. And then finally, there's a collection of proven systems. So it's structured, defined processes and tools that a lean practitioner is able to say, oh, in this particular case, I need to apply error proofing, or this is setup production, this is productive maintenance, this is pull, this is 6S or 5S. And so lean practitioners say, I have a collection of tools in my toolbox, and I'm going to systematically pull the right tools and apply them to the problem I'm trying to solve under those lean principles with the right leaders at the helm so that I achieve the results that I need for my business. Now, we work with a bunch of different people, and as I said, lean works everywhere. So whether you're in medical devices or in the industrial space or automotive, whether you're in chemical, oil, and gas, which is more continuous manufacturing instead of discrete. If you're doing services, if you're doing financial, if you're doing healthcare, it doesn't matter. Lean works everywhere it's tried. So we really believe that every company can improve their business and their results and their employee engagement by deploying lean. So if you look at the lean-focused business system, you've got the guiding principles at the top. At the bottom. So the guiding principles are, we think of that as the foundation. This is what sits underneath everything we do. And then in the middle of that is the foundation. And those are the lean foundational topics. And then the section at the top is on the left, the growth system. How do you grow your business? The center is the lean system, the core of lean. And on the right, you've got the leadership system. How do you develop your business, your culture, and your talent? You'll see that little box around Dynamic Kanban PFEP, or plan for every part. That's a lean term. That's what we're going to be looking at today. So we're within the lean system portion of the lean focused business system. All right, so let's talk about inventory in general. If you think of inventory in sort of a really simple value stream map type approach, on the left-hand side, you've got suppliers that are supplying externally produced stuff. It doesn't matter whether it's a completely different company or a sister plant that makes stuff for you. You've got stuff coming in from outside. Those sit in raw material stores until they go through some sort of manufacturing process. And so you're going to have work in process or work in progress, or WIP, which means I used to be raw material, but you've done some stuff to me. I'm not quite done yet. You can't ship me to the customer. You need to do a little bit more to me. And then at the far right, I become a finished product that you can ship to your customer. So your finished products are the things that are through your production process, and they're ready to go. This is what you're going to invoice for. This kicks off the financial transaction that your customers then pay you for. So when you say lean is about getting paid to deliver value to the customer in a manufacturing operation, this is a description of that value. I buy a bunch of stuff, I manufacture stuff with that, and I deliver it to my customer so I can get paid. You can see at the top, there may be private labeled goods. At the bottom, you see there may be consignment stocks. You might have vendor managed inventory. We'll touch on some of this stuff later. But all of the inventory we own within the supply chain is what we're talking about when we talk about the inventory pipeline and what it takes to manage inventory successfully. All right, so there are 4 goals of inventory, and these have to be coordinated, but sometimes they appear to be fighting each other. So we really want the best customer service, and when we say that in this context, we mean on-time delivery to the lead time that the market demands. So what that means is, if we say my internal lead time is 4 weeks, but the really market wants us to be at 2, then 4 weeks doesn't matter. 2 weeks is what we need to achieve. So best customer service means I hit the dates I promise, and I promise dates that have a lead time that matches what the customer expects for my industry. Low-cost plant operation means I am efficient at what I do. I'm delivering to the customer the way they want it to be delivered. I'm meeting their quality objectives, and I'm meeting their delivery objectives, and I'm doing that in a way that is cost-effective. I'm minimizing my inventory investment because excess inventory, as we see later, takes up space and money and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm trying to maximize my profit, which means in addition to controlling the inventory that I'm holding on the shelf within my walls, I'm controlling other things related to pricing, revenue, cost, etc. So my bottom line, when I look at my profit and loss statement, I'm driving myself to a profitable organization. So inventory is one of the 8 wastes as defined by lean. Lean globally has 8 wastes, and inventory is one of them. And you say, wait a minute, Joe, that's not fair. I'm a manufacturing company, or I'm a distribution company, or I'm a hospital. I have to have inventory to do what I'm supposed to do. That's true. I get that. But in the lean thinking, we're saying there is necessary inventory that you need to run your business. It's called necessary waste, which seems sort of oxymoronic, but that's what it's called, necessary waste. But what we're looking for is, where do I have more inventory than what I need, which is pure waste. And that's what I want to eliminate. I want to run my business with the right, correct size of inventory and not have too much more. So inventory is waste. It costs money for me to carry it. So in order for me to meet these 4 goals of inventory management and having a good operation, I need to control my inventory. All right, so let's think about how inventory relates to finance or accounting. So inventory is an asset. Yeah, I told you it was waste. It's true. It is waste, but financially, it is an asset. It's on the balance sheet. You'll often see it divided into three categories. It can be raw material, which means it came in from the supplier. I haven't done anything to it yet. I might have unpackaged it. I might have moved it, but I haven't physically or functionally transformed it. I haven't painted it, welded it, cut it, bent it, anything like that. WIP, as we said before, is work in progress or work in process, which means I've done some stuff to it, but it's not done yet. And then finished goods means I could ship this. It is a shippable product for the customer. Inventory is also expressed in some cases as working capital. Working capital is a financial phrase that means what does it take to sustain this business, to keep this business running. So I have working capital, money that I invest to buy my inventory, to put the inventory on the shelf so I can make something out of it, so I can ship, so I can eventually get paid. But the time that lapse between when I bought my raw material and when I shipped it to the customer and then got paid by the customer is an amount of time that could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months. All of that time, I've paid for that inventory and I haven't got paid back for it yet. That's working capital. It's the capital it takes to work the business. And so the definition of working capital, there are three categories for this. Accounts receivable, which means the customers owe me for stuff that I've shipped. That costs me money because I'm carrying them for a while. Minus accounts payable, which is the opposite. I owe my suppliers money for stuff I've already received but haven't paid them yet. Plus the inventory, raw material, WIP, and finished goods. So if you talk to a financial or accounting person, this is how they think about inventory. How much money are you soaking up because we're sitting on inventory? Okay, so why do we care about that? So we've got this working capital. It's AR minus AP plus my inventory. Well, it's the amount of money required to sustain the business. Inventory is an asset, but I paid money for it. Therefore, the less working capital that I have, the more efficient I am. I'm using my money more effectively. My return on the investment to run and facilitate this business is higher. I'm making money faster. I'm turning money faster. So a case example, DuPont has said that a 10% decrease in inventory is the same thing as increasing their ROI as a 39% in sales. So don't underestimate what you can do to improve your cash flow or your working capital by reducing your inventory. It is a huge benefit, and we spend an awful lot of effort talking about inventory reduction as a part of managing your cash flow and your working capital with all kinds of businesses that we interact with. All right, now let's look at some examples of the types of inventory, just to make sure we're all on the same page and we're using the same lingo. As I said before, raw materials is something you purchase from the outside. External company, sister plant, doesn't matter. It came in through your receiving door. It's a piece of something that you're eventually going to do something to. Now you say, well, wait a minute, Josette. Some of the stuff we buy, we sell as a finished good. I buy a filter and I sell it as a service part. That's true. It's still considered raw material for these purposes because you didn't put any labor into it. You bought it and then you resold it. So does it classify as raw material and finished goods? Yeah, sort of. Some people have what's called purchased finished goods or PFG, which means I bought this, I can now ship it, I don't have to do anything to it. I don't have to commit labor, and I don't have to commit machine time to do anything to it. But for the sake of what we're discussing today, I've got raw material that comes in. I then do something to it. It becomes work in process. So I bought a sole of a shoe. I did some sewing, and I now have a shoe that's partly completed, and eventually I finish it, and my shoe's ready to ship. So there are a bunch of subcategories in this. You can have sub-assemblies. You can have late point definition WIP versus early WIP. You can have obsolete. You can have excess. You can have development inventory because there's a product that you're in the process of launching, and so you're building prototypes. So there's a lot of types of inventory, but what we're talking about today is those direct materials that you buy and transform to eventually ship to your customer and get paid. All right, so let's think a little bit about the different categories that exist for what inventory costs you to run a business. So it's money that can't be used for anything else. You've sunk it into inventory. It is a sunk cost. Once you buy that inventory, you've tied that money up until you convert it into an invoice and eventually get paid. So there's really 5 broad categories, and a lot of people overlook this. Everybody thinks of the category on the left. What does it cost for me to physically pay for the item? That's the cost of material, the invoice cost on the PO. Next is, what does it cost for me to place all those orders? I'm going to issue a bunch of purchase orders or a bunch of work orders for the floor. And there's a labor cost to do that. There's the cost of systems to do that. So there is a cost of the transactional side of managing your inventory. Then there are stocking costs. And stocking cost is, what does it cost me to physically have shelves and fork trucks and material handlers and all that kind of stuff out on the floor doing the care and feeding of my inventory. Fourth is the cost of space. I'm going to pay for the space that it takes to store this inventory. And so this is particularly true if you're in an operation that has large warehousing. They have external warehouses, or they have a purchased parts warehouse, or they have a finished goods warehouse, or they have rented storage space, or they have trailers in the yard. Drives me crazy. But so many people have space that they've either bolted on, rented, or built in order to house all the inventory. And then the 5th category is carrying cost. What is the cost of money? And a lot of people get tripped up on this. So let's talk about this a little more. Carrying costs is, what is it costing me to have this money tied up in inventory instead of having it be free to use it somewhere else? Well, the first one is the actual carrying cost itself. So you say to yourself, well, I spent $100,000 on inventory. What else could I have done with that $100,000? It could be earning interest in the bank. It could be hiring employees. It could be capital expenditures to buy new equipment. So you're always going to ask myself, what is the opportunity cost of the fact that I've got this money tied up in inventory when it could be doing something else for me? Next is the storage cost, the space, the people, the equipment, everything that it takes to take care of that inventory once it's within your 4 walls going through your fingers. And then the third one, which people often overlook, is the risk cost of inventory. So I talked to a client very recently that had a very bad practice of buying steel ahead of time. They were buying coils and sheets of steel in advance. And what that meant is that steel was sitting in their factory rusting. So now they've got a problem that because they bought it too early, it has rusted, and now they have to do something to it before they can use it, or the outer layer of the coil is no longer any good. So when I want you to think about inventory risk, I want you to think about obsolescence. This could go obsolete. I want you to think about this could be damaged. This could be stolen. I could have an insurance risk. That's big if you've got something that's flammable. So if you're storing a lot of cardboard, if the fire marshal inspects you or if the insurance company inspects you, they're going to say, oh my goodness, you got to get this cardboard out of here, because if this building was to have a fire, the cardboard would make it go up like an inferno. And then you can have, like I said, rust or other deterioration of the material as it sits on the shelf. All right, so let's think about what is the role of inventory management. So your customer service, remember, I want to ship what I'm supposed to ship on the date I'm supposed to ship it with a lead time that meets the needs of my customers within my market. I need to have the right quality. I need to ship the right quantity. I need to ship it at the right time. I need to deliver it to the right place, and I need to do it at the right price. I need to be competitive. So inventory management says, how do I make sure all 5 of those things are true? How do I make sure as I manage my inventory that the quality is what it needed to be? And you say, well, but that's not my problem, Josette. That's the process out on the floor. Yeah, but you own the supplier. Inventory management includes managing that supplier relationship. So you want to be thinking about how your supplier performance is for both quality and for delivery, so that you're not late and you're not getting stuff that can't be used. So inventory management says, I'm going to make sure all 5 of these things come true for the stuff that I own. Well, now that raises a few conflicts. So if you talk to a marketing person or a salesperson, their objective is, I want to be able to sell anything that the customer dreams up at any time, and I want to be able to ship it immediately. I want high revenue and high product availability. So I want everything on the shelf all the time. If I have to, I'm going to interrupt a production run if I get a last-minute order, and I'm going to make sure I get to ship it. and I'm going to have really, really high inventory. Stack it to the ceiling. I want as much as I can have. So that's the sales and marketing view. Your production people are going to say, I want a level load production. I don't want to make 100 one day and 1,000 the next day. They want low cost because they are production people and they think efficiently. From a customer service perspective, production says, I'm okay with some shortages, but you can't short me every day. It kills my labor productivity. It makes my scheduling team just pull their hair out when I have shortages. Oh, I wish I could run this, but we're missing a part. So they don't want shortages, and they realize they're going to happen every once in a while, but they don't want it to be a regular occurrence. Don't disrupt my schedule. Don't break into a production run. Don't give me a schedule in the morning, then bring me a hot sheet in the afternoon. If your plant's running on hot sheets or expedite lists or disruptions, it's an indication that your scheduling process is out of control, and that's directly related to inventory management. And the production people are saying, you know what? I'm okay having some raw material inventory, but don't give me a bunch of finished goods. They're a pain in the neck to store. And they've got all that material and all that labor and all of that equipment time tied up into that. And if I'm making finished goods, and I make finished goods number A, and I take very precious material and labor and equipment, and then I get an order for B, and I don't have that available anymore, now I'm in a bind, and people are yelling at me. So let me keep my raw material as long as I can, and I'll convert it as I need to ship the finished goods. Then you put your finance hat on. And those guys say, well, low cost. I've got to have high profits. So I want low fixed costs. Do not bring in a ton of inventory. Don't put in a bunch of warehouse space. I don't want racks everywhere. Don't put forklifts in every single aisle. And keep your inventory low. They want better prices because we have low cost, because that makes us very competitive. They don't want to disrupt production either, because they don't want the streamlining of the way production runs to be disrupted and interrupted, because it lowers our efficiency. And they want low inventory. It's all about cash flow. So you can see I've got some people in the building saying, I want inventory. I've got other people saying, I really don't want much inventory. And that's the balancing act that an inventory manager is always looking at. What do I need to be focusing on? So some of the common pitfalls of the way we manage inventory are missing a delivery. So if you've got low on-time delivery, really long lead times, low customer satisfaction, the customers are always chewing on us because we're not doing what we're supposed to. We've got expedited shipments to the customers. We've got expedited stuff coming in from the suppliers. Every time we're turning around, we're changing our schedules. Let's make sure that the material portion of running your factory is under control, that you're not missing things because you are missing material, that you're not missing things because your supplier sent you bad quality. Let's make sure that inventory is checking the box on making sure that we can hit our deliveries. Next is excess inventory. It's really, really common to go into a site and say they're just carrying too much stuff. They're doing it to protect delivery. I get why they're doing it, but there has to be a more scientific way that we can look at that excess inventory and say, how much of this is really necessary? Do we really need to have all of this? And so take a scientific view of what are your order quantities, what are your lead times, what are your sawtooth curves, what are you holding in stock versus what are you making to order? So what we're looking for here is if you have low inventory turns, your cash flow is poor, you've rented storage space because you're out of space, you're using debt, you're borrowing money to pay for material. That means you got too much. We got to get it under control and get your cash flow and your space and your overall dedicated inventory dollars down. And then the third category is poor planning or scheduling. So your operational planning, what are you going to make and when? What are the due dates on your work orders? How good are you at schedule compliance? I send a schedule to the floor and they hit it. And it goes to the next work cell and they hit it again. And so what we're looking for, if you've got frequent schedule changes or these hot lists I mentioned before, if you can't give a firm date to your customer and you say, well, you might have it in 2 weeks, but it might take 3 or 4, that's not a good sign of your scheduling process. So when we talk about pitfalls, we're asking ourselves, are we delivering like we're supposed to? Do we have too much excess inventory to try to cover delivery? And our planning process is just so haphazard that we're not predictable and reliable. Remember, when you talk about lean, you'll hear words like agile, flexible, reliable, sustainable, dependable. These kinds of pitfalls indicate that your lean culture is not sustaining correctly. All right, so let's talk about Kanban systems. All right, so you're going to say to yourself, okay, Josette, so I'm supposed to get better at cash flow and I'm supposed to have less space. Okay, that all makes sense. I get that. So how in the world do I do that? How do I reduce my inventory and increase my inventory turns? Well, the first thing we want to do is look at your incoming stuff. So we want to reduce the amount of safety stock we're holding to cover variation during the supply side. So this is the push side. Your supplier is sending stuff to you, and we want to make sure that we're not inserting a ton of safety stock just because the supplier is unreliable. They don't hit their due dates. Their quality stinks. We reject 1 out of 3 orders. We sort everything they send us, that kind of stuff. If that's occurring, you're going to insert safety stock to protect your delivery, and when you do that, you're hurting your turns. One of the key concepts in inventory is the concept of the sawtooth curve, which is what does the shape of the inventory replenishment pattern look like? And so we want to buy smaller quantities more frequently. Let me give you a hint. If you run traditional ABC analysis on your parts, where A's are your biggest spend, not quantities, but spend, B's are next, and C's are your lowest. You want to turn your A's weekly. You want to turn your B's every 2 weeks. You want to turn your C's every 4 weeks. That's the lean benchmark. What that means is you're going to buy A items, and remember, you assign ABC with purchase separated from manufacturing. You want to buy your A items once a week, your B's twice a month, your C's once a month. You're going to produce your A items weekly, B items every 2 weeks, C items once every 4 weeks. That's the way to set, well, what is a reasonable quantity for me to be pursuing? A's don't have to be daily. I was in a plant years ago that thought A's had to be daily. No, that's silly. You're going to kill yourself on transactions. So weekly for A's is a good number. And then the third thing you want to do is reduce your vendor lead time, because the longer their lead time, the higher the risk. If you ask anybody today who's trying to predict a 12-week lead time or a 16 or a 20 or a 40-week lead time, how many are you going to need 26 weeks from now? Oh, good grief, that's crazy. How am I supposed to know that? Well, the longer your lead times are, the higher your risk is that you're going to guess wrong. So what you end up doing is you carry more inventory than you think you need to, because if you got it wrong, it takes so long to recover. So these are 3 things that we often do to improve inventory turns. Okay, in general, there are 5 methods of replenishment. The first one is vendor managed inventory. It's sitting on your floor. A vendor comes in, does a review of your bins, and refills what's needed. Fastenal does this, Grainger does this. There are a lot of companies out there that do this if they have a local warehouse or facility that can serve you by coming physically onto your site and checking your inventory. Most vendor managed inventory is checked once or twice a week. I've been in plants where it's checked 3 times a day. High turn plants, they're checking it multiple times a day. And it's usually small incidental type items, screws, gaskets, nuts, that kind of stuff. It's hardware is the most common thing I see in vendor managed inventory. Consignment is inventory that is within your 4 walls, but you do not own it until you perform a transaction to transfer the ownership. All right, so let's say you get containers of stuff from overseas, and your supplier says to you, there are huge benefits for me in freight and in the cost of customs and in loading the container if I can ship you a whole container, but a container is 2 months worth, and I know you want to receive this weekly. So the supplier says, I'm willing to own that inventory if you let me ship it all at once, and then you will take ownership of it as you pull it out of the consignment and put it in your active inventory. There are all kinds of rules for how you have to do that and segregate it and account for it and all that kind of stuff, so you can't just willy-nilly do this. But consignment can work really well if your supplier agrees to that. So both number 1 and number 2, your supplier have to agree to do that. You have to partner with them to do it. Both of those solutions and number 3, Kanban or pull, are assuming they're stocked items. You do not do vendor managed inventory or consignment or Kanban for a non-stock item. Non-stock items are always managed by MRP. They have to be demand-based. When I have firm demand, I do this. So Kanban is items with regular demand that are going to be on an automatic or a triggered replenishment system. You need to have a minimum order quantity that's low enough that you can justify, yep, every time I commit to this, I'm going to get a quantity that's reasonable for me to have on the shelf. My general rule of thumb is that if your minimum order quantity covers more than 6 months of demand, it doesn't qualify for Kanban. That's too much to commit to without somebody taking a look at it. If you have an item that's in special circumstance, it's being replaced by another item. It's just in a new product introduction, it's brand new, and we don't know what the daily demand was going to be. You're trying to negotiate a second source or a new source. Those are really, really strange circumstances. So don't go to an automatic pull or an automatic Kanban system if you've got weird circumstances. So if the first three things don't work, then you do MRP. Now, a lot of companies go to MRP first, and I'm not a fan of that. I always say, does your supplier do consignment? If they do, take it, because it means not all the inventory is on your books. Do they do EMI? Let them take it. Be very careful you don't give them bins that are so big that they can pile you to the ceiling with inventory. Then next is Kanban. Remember, these are all stocked items. These first three are all stocked items. Anything that's not stock is on MRP. And then the fifth and the worst is human intervention, which means this is so bizarre, it is so erratic, it is so unpredictable, or it requires such special handling that a human being has to intervene every single time you get this. Those should be few and far between. In most plants, those don't exist. I run into a plant once in a while that orders something that's so bizarre that they have to put it on human intervention. All right, so you've got production or in-process Kanban. What that means is it's going to trigger the production process to make some. A withdrawal Kanban means I'm going to draw some out of one location, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to reproduce it or refill that. So that you're going to transfer parts. So it's all sometimes called a transfer Kanban. A supplier Kanban is an inter-process, but it does say to your supplier, you need to send me this. Now, I don't get too hung up on this. Kanban is Kanban in my book. If I've got something on pull, whether it's an electronically based pull system or whether it's a cards and Kanban boards and all that kind of stuff, Kanban is Kanban for me. So don't get too hung up on having to designate the different types of Kanban on the floor. But understand, if I've got a part, let's say I've got a bracket that's used in 3 different work cells out on the floor and it comes in from an outside supplier. That doesn't necessarily mean that all 3 work cells that use that are going to generate signals back to the supplier. I'll probably choose the primary user on the floor that's going to generate their supplier signals. The other 2 work cells are going to do transfer signals, and they're going to come back to the main work cell that uses it and say, hey, send me 10 more of those. So that's why we call this out. There will be times when you don't need to have every signal go to the supplier. It can be a transfer signal. Okay, when you're doing Kanban, 2 cards is the preferred or ideal Kanban type. The reason being, you're going to have 1 card that's available for the on-hand inventory, whatever on the shelf, and you're going to have another card waiting for an incoming order. So I've got stuff that I'm going to use, and I've got stuff that's on order that's going to come in time for me to use it when I run out of this current active bin. A 1-card solution, pain in the neck out on the floor, but a 1-card solution is used when your minimum order quantity is so high that it's higher than your calculated lead time demand plus safety stock. I'm not going to go into all the math, but there's math behind this that tells you when you need a 1-card solution. The same is true for a multi-card solution. There are 3 circumstances where you say 2 cards won't do it. I am going to run out of inventory if I deploy a 2-card solution. So if you've got a really long lead time, let's say I've got an A item with 12-week lead time. I can still order it in weekly quantities if my minimum order quantity allows me to. So I might have 12 or 13, based on whether I'm break-even or empty bin, cards to cover the 12-week lead time so I don't order 12 weeks of inventory all at the same time on a 2-card system. I might have really high demand variation, which means I want to resize really frequently. I've got seasonal demand, so I'm 6 cards for a while, and then part of the year I'm 8, part of the year I'm 4, and that multi-card solution allows me to flex up and then flex down. That's the whole point of being dynamic. I flex my inventory with the business conditions. And the third one is I have a maximum order quantity due to a process or a transportation limit. I can only order a truckload at a time. I can only send 500 pieces through heat treat, something like that. If I've got a maximum order quantity that puts me in a squeeze play, I'm going to need multiple solutions. The most cards I ever deployed for a single part number was 89, and it worked. It was a part that went through a heat treat operation. Heat treat was limited how many could go through as one lot, so I had 89 active cards on the floor, and it worked beautifully. It didn't feel like 89 cards, but it technically was 89 active cards. All right, so there are 10 rules for your Kanban system or your pull system to be effective. The first one is you really need to level load production. Now, I will tell you, Kanban helps do that. One of the best things you can do to level load is to deploy Kanban. It is an automatic level loading tool. You need rapid changeovers so that you have small lots. The reason that is, you do not want Kanban to be handcuffed by these huge lot quantities because you've got changeovers that take hours or days, and you've got these huge production runs. And then you need standard work. And you say, well, Josette, what does standard work have to do with Kanban? Well, if my work cell is not reliable and predictable, how can my inventory be? If my work cell is not standardized and reliable and predictable, won't I have to carry extra safety stock, which kills my inventory turns? The answer is yes. So if you take a value stream map view of your operation, you say, oh, that cell's down a lot. Oops, safety stock. Oh, that cell has a labor issue. Safety stock. That cell has supplier issues. Safety stock. That cell has really high quantities. Safety stock. All of those are damaging your inventory performance. Next is the process has to be capable of producing good parts. It has to be a rational and a stable process. You have to have good methods of transportation, shortest routes. You can't make something in one cell and take hours to get it to the next cell or to get it to shipping. You need a disciplined organization that follows the process, one that's willing to raise their hand when they say, this doesn't look right. I think that there's an error in this, or the supplier is late, what do we need to do? Or I have a stock out that's unexpected, we better figure out why. So you need the discipline in the organization that will follow the process and raise their hand when they see something that doesn't look right. Your downstream process is going to withdraw items in the right amount. So let's go back to our transfer Kanban example. Work cell B goes back to work cell A and says, hey, I need more of those brackets. Well, don't take 2 weeks worth. That's way too much to pull out. So give them standardized quantities that they pull that is reasonable for them to take back to their work cell. Same with your supplier quantities. Make sure that your downstream process is pulling things in the right quantity. And then number 6 is the flip side of that. Make sure every supplier is producing items in the right quantities. Remember, A items weekly, B items 2 weeks, C items 4 weeks. Nothing gets made or moved without a Kanban. You can't just move stuff willy-nilly. You can't just decide you're going to go pick something up and take it to your work cell. So you're going to wait for that replenishment signal. So that means a Kanban accompanies every single item every single time. There's either a card or a transfer sheet or a traveler sheet or an electronic signal. There's something that gives you permission and instructions for what is being moved and where and in what quantity. Your defects or incorrect amounts or errors, rework is never sent downstream. You never burden the downstream process with what went wrong upstream. So if I make scrap, I don't send it on. If I overrun, which I should never do, remember, overproduction is one of the 8 ways. If I do overrun, don't send it. It's not their problem. They shouldn't have to store the fact that one cell worked over. And then what you do over time is the number of Kanbans or the overall Kanban level. The water level gets reduced because as you lower that inventory, you reveal the next problem. So you lower your inventory and say, wow, the downtime on that machine is really hurting us. It's down at least once a week. Well, that just revealed that that issue has got to be solved. All right, let's talk about a quick case study. We helped a global manufacturing company that had multiple sites. They really needed to improve their inventory turns. And so what they wanted to do was do a plan for every part, PFEP, in their ERP system. They managed more than 100,000 active part numbers. They could not do this with manual Kanban. They had a seasonal business. There was no way they could resize manual Kanban to fit their seasonal needs. So the first thing we did was train their buyers and schedules on basic inventory, ABC class. What's not held in stock, what's not, what's pull versus what's push, what's a sawtooth curve look like, how do I calculate safety stock, what do we do with safety stock for the supply side versus the demand side. Then we calculated and assigned the ABC class to all the purchased and manufactured items to make sure we manage the money, figure out where the money flows. That's the A items. We cleaned up how the stuff was designated. What are we going to hold in stock? And what are we not going to hold in stock? What are we only going to purchase or manufacture when we have an order? And we had to narrow down that 100,000 items. There was a large percent of that 100,000 items that didn't need to be held in stock, but yet it had a safety stock number in the system, or it had a min-max in the system, which means every time they got it down to zero, the system told them to get more, and they did it because nobody had stopped to think which items should be held in stock. And then we created a scientific model to calculate that plan for every part. So in the first 5 months, which is the pilot phase, they said, let's test this. The items that we had deployed a solution decreased their inventory dollars, even though they were at the time of the season when volume was going up by 9%, while everything outside of the pilot went up by 19%. It was a huge success. And so what the plant learned was we can be more effective about the way we manage every single part, even though we've got 100,000 of them to manage. And their planners and their schedulers and their buyers became so much more efficient because they could look at the system and say, oh my goodness, this is an A item. Don't screw it up. It's an A item. It's a ton of money. They could look at the system and say, this is a stocked item. It should be in stock. If I stock out, that's an error. This is not a stocked item. Why do I have it in inventory? What caused me to order more? Oh, I've got a customer order. Very good then. Those kinds of, that logical, fact-based thinking became the core of their entire planning, purchasing, scheduling operation. And that's the kind of success we see every time we do this. And I do this all the time because it's what I do. A lot of organizations just have not taken the time to step back and say, okay, take a deep breath. What do we need to do? What would make us run better? What would make the hot lists go away? What would make the stockouts stop occurring? What would make our on-time delivery go up? What would make our shortages go down? That's what we want people to be thinking about. All right, let's think about some next steps. If you're going to deploy Kanban, keep it simple. Don't boil the ocean. Like the case example we talked about. Start with a pilot area, a certain value stream in your plant, a certain work cell, all your purchase parts, the finished goods that need to be in stock because the customer requires a short lead time. Keep it simple when you're getting started. Develop a strategy in phases towards your point of use. So POU, point of use inventory. So put your supermarkets on the floor where the stuff is used. Don't have a stockroom. Don't have a centralized warehouse, or even worse, an off-site warehouse. Make sure that all of that inventory is within eyesight of the people that use it. That means most plants that have not thought about this before have to completely rethink their floor layout. Make sure your suppliers are playing a big role in this. Get the data from the suppliers. The first thing you got to do is clean up your data set. What are my lead times, minimum order quantities, rounding values, and maximum order quantities for every single thing that I purchase or make? So work with your suppliers to confirm all of that data. Mr. Supplier, can you really ship this in 2 weeks? Or is it really 2.5? If it's really 2.5, don't lie to your system. Don't lie to the Kanban. Put in the right data. Make it really, really visual. You shouldn't have to count if it's very visual. So I can walk up to a work cell, point of use inventory, and know I should have 2 boxes of those, 1 box of that. I should have 1 rack of that. That's stored in a crate. That's stored in a bin. That's in a tote. All that kind of stuff. Putting lines on the floor, putting lines on the wall, putting open spaces on the shelf. Make it so that if you see a blank space on the shelf, there had better be a note there that says Kanban card on the board, which means I've already ordered the replenishment. This is supposed to be an empty spot. Or make sure if you've got an empty spot, it means this is an error and somebody has to respond to it. So make it as visual as it can be. Continue to tweak those quantities down, lower that sawtooth curve. Don't put delivery at risk, but continue to reduce that inventory so that you see what is the next thing I'm going to improve. Remember the spirit of continuous improvement. Kanban is not something you do once and finish. It's not a project. It's a way of life. So you get it deployed, but then you're going to say, what's the next thing that should be tackled? Is it machine downtime? Is it cross-training? Is it supplier performance? Is it labor productivity? All of those things relate to the way your Kanbans are designed. And then as you move from Kanbans to make to order, which is what you should do, remember, inventory is waste. So you want as much make to order as you can do. Use that logic of what do I have to do upstream so that downstream can convert more to make to order or to have smaller batch quantities or more frequent fulfillment on their triggers. Use that standard, make a plan, execute it, check it to make sure it's, and then act on what you learn in the check. That plan, do, check, act is a really, really robust way of looking at things. So if you need help with this, raise your hand. It's what we do. You can tell I love this stuff. It makes me a geek. I probably should be medicated, but I love this stuff. So if you need help, ask for help. So we can do a dynamic Kanban or a PFEP workshop with you. We can teach you how to think about this stuff. We can look at the system you've got deployed and see if there's areas that we think it could be improved. If you say, Josette, we've never done Kanban, we're 40 years late, we can help you with that. We can figure out where would you start? What are the pitfalls? What might really trip you up? What are the landmines you need to avoid? So those kinds of things, we can help you get started. We can advise you, we can coach you, we can teach you, we can make sure that you have the tools and the education that you need to make this work. All right, if we did something like that, these are the kind of deliverables you should expect. We will run ABC classification. You have to have that. You got to know where the money is. We will do sawtooth analysis for everything that's going to be in stock. What is your replenishment quantity? What's your projected average, maximum, and minimum inventory, which implies we'll also calculate safety stock. What are your replenishment methods? Are you doing VMI? Are you on consignment? Is it on pull? If it is it manual cards or is it electronic Kanban? What's stuck with being on MRP? We will build a PFEP template, plan for every part. Who's your source? What's your standard cost? What's your replenishment method? What's your safety stock approach? We will look at your physical deployment. How are you going to put this stuff out on the floor at point of use? How do your supermarkets need to be designed? Are you using physical cards? Are you in break event or on empty event? All that stuff is part of the physical care and feeding of the parts. You will put together what's called a Kanban RACI matrix. Who's responsible for each area, who's held accountable for that, who's consulted, and who's informed. We'll make sure that everybody knows the role they play within the overall Kanban thing, the Kanban world. We'll look at leader standard work, LSW. What's the leader standard for Kanban items? So for example, suppose I've got a work cell out on the floor and they get a stock out. Who's the person that responds to that? Who responds to the work cell that should have made the part or the supplier that should have shipped the part? What if the supplier's not late? It's not that the supplier was late. It's not that they shipped the wrong quantity. We're just out. Was there a scrap issue? So that's leader standard work and audit. Plan, do, check, act. The check is the audit. We'll make a Kanban storyboard. How does your card travel? Or how does the electronic signal travel? What is your process for resizing if you're a seasonal business? We'll develop your standard operating procedures, the standard work for your Kanban. What do buyers and planners do every day, every week? How often do you resize? When you resize, how do you deploy the new sized solutions so that they're effectively hitting the suppliers in the workflow? And then we'll put together your daily management. So you'll have an SQDIP, SQDIP, safety, quality, delivery, inventory, and productivity. What does your SQDIP board look like for as it relates to inventory management? Is that the purchasing team? Is it the scheduling team? Is there a sourcing team? All of that stuff is a part of how do you put together a pull system and a plan for every part in a site. Okay, with that, we've done a lot of recent webinars. We do these things all the time. You can sign up for these webinars at our website. I encourage you to go there. Lean Focus has a ton of great information. So if you are on a lean journey, if you're trying to expand your lean skills, if you're trying to learn about new topics, I encourage you to go there. Okay, George, do we have questions that we need to go back to from the crew?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you, Josette. That was just great. I really enjoyed listening to that. I learned a lot as well. Thank you. And we do have a few questions. Here's one. What sort of preparation needs to be made with your suppliers when you'll be implementing Kanban with?
Oh, that's a great question. Sometimes I have people say, oh, Josette, my suppliers won't agree to do this. Well, guess what? They won't know. They don't need to know you went on. What you need to do is just buy their data, make sure you have the minimum order quantities, lead times, et cetera, defined. That's the biggest thing you can do. Sometimes what you need to do is write them a letter. Dear supplier, we are going to a pull system and we need very accurate data. We are relying on you to provide the data in the attached spreadsheet, includes lead time, minimum order quantity, maximum, and you just send them a letter. Now what will happen is you're going to start triggering replenishment orders at a standard quantity at a time. You're going to make their life easier, not harder. So you do not need permission from your supplier to do this. I would work with them very diligently to get the data done.
Super, thanks. And here's another question. What's your experience been with implementing electronic Kanban versus physical cards? And are there places where one fits better than the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. All right, so 10 years ago, I would have said electronic Kanban wasn't far enough along to be reliable, and I've changed my mind on that. The vast majority of ERP systems today, medium tier, large tier, the big ones, the small ones, have a reorder point or some other triggering method that you can use. The downside of that is it is going to depend on system data. On-hand balance, open orders, is the quantity right on the open order? So let's say you've got a supplier purchase order out there, but the quantity's wrong and the date's wrong. Well, that means all of your replenishments are wrong. So in order for a pull system to work within an electronic system or electronic Kanban, your data has to be accurate. On-hand balances, open orders, whether they're work orders or purchase orders. So where do I think one works better versus the other? If you are a seasonal business, you need to be doing it electronically, not resize thousands of cards. If you have a situation where your data is suspect, bills and materials are wrong, you scrap a lot of stuff, there's a lot of downs, cards can be better. So that's another thing we can talk about in a PFEP or a Kanban event, is where you might want to do physical cards or other physical signals versus doing an electronic signal. But electronic signals have gotten very, very successful.
Super. Here's a third one. How important is the part level data in the construction of the Kanban system? Things like pack size, dimensions, lead time.
Yeah, that's a good question. We've talked a lot about lead time, minimum order quantity, et cetera, but pack size dimensions is also a big deal. So let's say, in fact, I've got a client doing this right now. Let's say you're trying to do inventory, you're creating markets, your assembly cells. Well, you got to figure out how much inventory you need to put there. So the first thing is to calculate your sawtooth curve. When I place an order, am I going to get 100 at a time, which is 4 boxes, or I'm going to get 200 at a time, which is 8 boxes? So you need to know that. The next question is, how much space does a box take? So in some supermarket deployments, having pack size, dimensions, does it need to be cold storage? Do they expire? Am I going to store them in the box that came from the supplier? I'm going to put them in a tote. All of those things are very critical for some deployments. Other deployments, it doesn't matter. You stick the stuff on the shelf and you're fine. If you've got really bulky items, pack size and dimensions are probably important. I mean, pack size, it takes a 2 foot by 2 foot footprint to store it. It's on a full pallet. It's a half pallet. When I say pack size, I don't mean how many are in a box. That's a minimum order quantity or rounding value. So it can be really critical to know those kinds of things when you're planning your storage.
Oh, super, thanks. Here's another one. I think the person is really just kind of looking for maybe a couple of gems. So it's kind of a tough question, but what are some best practices that you've seen in Kanban systems? I think you're kind of free to pick from any place you like.
Okay, best practices. I think it's important to have daily and weekly standard work for buyers, planners, and schedulers. Every day I review my MRP messages for my non-stock items. I resize once a month. I track my stockouts back to a root cause. Was it a supply side failure or a demand side failure? That standard work of how do we manage the Kanban is such a critical thing for success. I think the other thing is I have more success when the intent of the project is to teach people, that we teach them how to think. That when I say sawtooth curve, they know what I mean. When we talk ABC, they know what I mean. That they are learning not just push this button, copy this number, divide by 2, not that they understand the math, the logistics, the ramifications, the upstream and downstream inputs and outputs of the process. So I view this as a great employee development opportunity. And then the other thing I would say is inventory management can't be viewed as it's owned by a silo of just the inventory or supply chain or materials management team. It's engineering, it's finance, it's operations, it's cross-training. It's a multi-disciplined, multifunctional, diagonally cross-section of the organization that makes materials management or inventory management work. So when an operation looks at it as a universal project to tackle, even though the materials management team might be leading it, they have more success.
And Josette, I hope you don't mind. I want to insert one of my own questions. I can remember experience being in a factory, and we were implementing a lot of Kanban, but I saw the most interesting behavior. If you would talk to different people, you got the very different responses about how well the Kanban was doing. So people at the working level would kind of quietly come to me and talk to me about stockouts and Kanban failures of multiple types. But when I talked to others, especially, it seemed like managers, they would, it just felt like they had a very different perspective, that everything was working well. Have you ever run into a situation like that? And if you have, how do you deal with it?
Well, I think the best for that is daily management. And you're going to say, oh, Josette, that's a crazy answer. Well, but let's think about it. Suppose if I do my daily management Gemba walk, and for those of you on the call that do not do daily management today, go to the Lean Focus website and read about this, because this is a key deployment thing. So daily management means every single day I do a standard walk through the facility, and I look at the daily management boards in my work cells. And I have safety, quality, delivery, inventory, productivity. And that's where I'm going to hear, we had a stock out. I had a supplier reject that cost me 2 hours of downtime. I have downtime on the equipment and we're having to carry safety stock. That's where those kinds of conversations are going to occur. So the way to prevent insulated or isolated understanding of how Kanban really works is to make sure that it's a conversation that we have all the time. That the associates on the floor on a daily basis can raise their hand and say, the third time in this month, I've had a reject from this supplier. They can raise their hand, raise an issue, and get help with it. That way, you never have a leader that thinks, oh, we're flawless. Everything is golden. And the guys on the floor are struggling every single day because of downtime or supplier issues or whatever. So I think daily management in cooperation with a plan for every part is a really powerful solution.
Yeah, what a great answer. And they were not doing that. So, I mean, your answer really resonates with me from
Cool.
what I saw. We're running pretty short on time, so I think we really just have time for one last question. And it's sort of the opposite of the last question.
Okay.
What are the pitfalls that you've seen when people jump into Kanban? And I love your Ono quote that you have on screen for us. 100 harms and not a single gain from a half-hearted introduction. But I wonder, you've got a lot of experience. Can you talk about some places where you saw where it didn't go well?
So I would say the number one thing is bad data. That they say, oh, we don't have time to confirm all the data. Let's just go with what we got, even though we know it's wrong. So the lead times are wrong. The daily demand is wrong. Minimum order quantity is wrong. Maximum order quantity is wrong. And they calculate solutions that are garbage. Drives me crazy. So get clean data. It is the best thing you can do. The next thing I see is companies that view Kanban as a project. They think they're going to deploy it once and then ignore it for the rest of their life. So I go into a site and they say, oh, Josette, we've got so much excess, or we got so many stockouts. When did you resize the last time? Oh, I think Reagan was president. Well, that's a problem. So if you're not resizing frequently and staying on top, it's a living, breathing, dynamic system. That's why it's called dynamic Kanban. If you're not resizing frequently and if you're not built on good data, it will fail. And it's not Kanban's fault. It's a leadership failure.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much. And I think you're the only person I ever heard make Kanban funny, especially that meds part. Thank you so much for just a really, what a great discussion, and just love your passion about introducing lean. I'd like to thank everybody that's joined us. Really appreciate you spending your time with us, and encourage you to visit our website. As Josette said, we have just tons of webinars that we've saved, and we have many coming in the future. I hope you'll stay with us. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.